The US and Canada have always been friendly neighbors, sharing the world's longest undefended border and a deep history of cooperation. For decades, their relationship has been a model of peaceful coexistence, with families, businesses, and even entire industries seamlessly crossing back and forth. Until early 2025, when the US suddenly slapped harsh tariffs on Canadian goods, catching both governments and citizens off guard. Overnight, a sweeping 25% tariff hit most Canadian exports, grinding cross-border trade to a near halt and leaving truckloads of goods stranded at checkpoints. Even Canada's vital energy and critical minerals, resources that power American homes and industries, were hit with a 10% tariff, threatening supply chains that had always been taken for granted. The justification? A vague and sweeping claim of national security, leaving many to wonder what had really changed between these two allies. This wasn't just another policy shift. It was a direct blow to the world's most integrated trading relationship, one that had taken generations to build. By June, tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum soared to 50%, doubling costs for businesses and sending shockwaves through industries on both sides of the border. Small manufacturers and large corporations alike scrambled to adapt. US auto manufacturers, construction firms, and countless others suddenly faced skyrocketing prices for essential materials, forcing layoffs, delays, and tough decisions about the future. The message was clear: friendly trade was out, economic warfare was in. The spirit of partnership was replaced by suspicion and frustration. The move forced Canada, usually mild-mannered on the world stage, to decide how to respond to its closest ally's aggressive new stance. The nation's leaders faced mounting pressure to retaliate or seek compromise. The stage was set for a trade war that would test the limits of North America's economic partnership, with both sides bracing for a long and uncertain road ahead. The fence between neighbors had become a wall, one built not of wood or steel but of mistrust, lost opportunity, and the high cost of broken ties. Canada didn't just take the hit, it hit back. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government swiftly imposed $30 billion in counter-tariffs, targeting US goods from steel to bourbon and cheese. The goal: protect Canadian industries and create political pain in key US states. Provinces joined in, coordinating pressure tactics and making it clear Canada wouldn't be bullied. The tit-for-tat escalated, with both sides raising tariffs and hardening their positions. Canadian businesses and consumers felt the pinch, but there was broad support for standing up to US pressure. The trade war became a national cause, uniting federal and provincial leaders in a rare show of solidarity. But the costs were mounting, and both sides braced for a long, bruising fight. The era of polite trade was over. The gloves were off. The shouting match had begun. Ontario, Canada's largest province, took the trade war to the liquor aisle, making a move that would ripple through both sides of the border. What started as a dispute over steel and aluminum tariffs quickly escalated into a battle over bourbon and Chardonnay, catching everyday shoppers off guard. Premier Doug Ford banned all American alcohol from the LCBO, making US spirits vanish overnight. The shelves that once boasted Kentucky bourbon and California wine were suddenly bare, leaving customers and store owners scrambling for alternatives. The ban was a bold move, turning a trade dispute into a daily reality for consumers. Shoppers who had never thought twice about where their whiskey came from now found themselves caught in the crossfire of international politics. Even when Ottawa lifted most retaliatory tariffs in August, Ford refused to budge. He insisted that Ontario would not back down until the US addressed its own tariffs, making it clear that the province was willing to go it alone. American distillers found themselves locked out of a massive market while Ontario flexed its provincial power. For small US producers, the ban meant lost sales and uncertainty about the future as their products sat unsold in warehouses. The ban exposed the complex layers of Canadian federalism, with provinces wielding their own economic weapons. It was a reminder that in Canada, provinces can chart their own course, even when it means defying the federal government's efforts to ease tensions. For US alcohol producers, the federal tariff removal was meaningless if Ontario's shelves stayed empty. The impact was felt not just in boardrooms, but in small towns and family-run distilleries across America. The province held firm, demanding US concessions on steel and aluminum before letting bourbon and Chardonnay return. Ontario's message was clear. Trade is a two-way street, and they were willing to play hardball. Ontario's hardline stance kept the pain alive, even as Ottawa tried to de-escalate. The standoff became a test of political will, with both sides waiting to see who would blink first. The liquor ban became a symbol of just how personal and political the trade war had become. For many, it was no longer just about tariffs or trade deals, but about national pride, local economies, and the power of provinces to shape the everyday lives of their citizens. The Ontario alcohol ban hit American distillers hard. $221 million in annual exports to Canada evaporated almost overnight, leaving a gaping hole in the U.S. spirits industry. For many, Canada had been a reliable market, and the sudden loss sent shockwaves through small towns and big cities alike. Small U.S. distilleries, already operating on thin margins, lost major business. Many were forced to lay off workers, cut production, and watch as unsold inventory piled up in warehouses. Some even faced the threat of closure, as their financial safety nets quickly unraveled. Meanwhile, the LCBO, the government-run liquor retailer in Ontario, saw a 20% drop in spirit sales almost immediately. But Canadian producers suddenly thrived, stepping in to fill the gap left by American brands. Shelves that once showcased Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee whiskey now featured homegrown rye and craft gin. For some Ontario craft distilleries, sales tripled, turning what could have been a crisis into a golden opportunity. New jobs were created, and local brands gained loyal followings as consumers explored new tastes and supported their neighbors. The ban was a double-edged sword, devastating for U.S. exporters, but a windfall for local Canadian producers. The economic divide grew sharper, with some celebrating newfound success while others struggled to survive. Lifting the ban became politically tricky. Consumers missed their favorite U.S. brands and demanded change, but local producers lobbied fiercely to keep the protection in place, arguing it was vital for their survival and the local economy. The alcohol fight mirrored the broader trade war: clear losers, unexpected winners, and no easy way out. Negotiations dragged on, with both sides digging in and tensions running high. Economic pain was real, but so were the new alliances and rivalries it created. Distillers on both sides of the border began to rethink their strategies, forging new partnerships or doubling down on local markets. The fallout was messy, with both sides counting their losses and a few surprise gains. Some businesses adapted and even thrived, while others faded away, unable to weather the storm. The hangover from this trade war would last long after the last bottle was sold, leaving a legacy of change, resilience, and hard lessons for the future. The trade war's impact rippled far beyond steel and alcohol. U.S. companies relying on Canadian materials saw costs soar, forcing price hikes or layoffs. Unions on both sides found themselves torn, protection for some, lost jobs for others. Consumers paid more for everything from soda cans to cars, as tariffs quietly raised prices across thousands of products. In Canada, American goods became pricier, pushing families to buy less or seek alternatives. The interconnected economies meant pain was shared. A U.S. tariff on Canadian lumber raised home prices in Arizona. A Canadian tariff on ketchup hit families in Calgary. The trade war wasn't a surgical strike, it was economic carpet bombing, with collateral damage everywhere. The lesson: when neighbors fight, everyone pays. The digital economy wasn't spared. The U.S. axed the de minimis exemption, meaning every package from abroad, no matter how small, faced tariffs and paperwork. Overnight, cross-border e-commerce collapsed. Postal traffic into the U.S. dropped 80%. Small Canadian businesses selling online to Americans were devastated, forced to halt shipments and lose their biggest market. The chaos spread globally as postal services suspended shipments and consumers lost access to unique products. The move, meant to protect U.S. businesses, ended up hurting small sellers everywhere and American shoppers too. The digital border slammed shut, showing that trade wars now hit not just factories but also data packets and cardboard boxes. E-commerce, once seamless, became a bureaucratic nightmare. The fallout was swift and severe, with innovation and small business taking the biggest hit. The new trade barriers weren't just physical, they were digital and just as damaging. As the trade war dragged on, Canadian unity fractured. Prime Minister Carney's decision to lift most retaliatory tariffs sparked fierce debate. Supporters called it a smart move to ease tensions. Critics saw it as surrender. Unions and steel producers felt betrayed, warning of job losses and plant closures. The opposition accused the government of giving up leverage without results. Provincial leaders like Doug Ford doubled down on hardline tactics, clashing with Ottawa's approach. The trade war became a political minefield, dividing parties, provinces, and industries. Canada's fight with the US was now also a fight within itself. Negotiations sputtered through the summer, with both sides talking but little progress. The main sticking point, the US claimed national security to justify tariffs, a hard argument to beat under trade law. Canadian officials pushed back, but legal challenges dragged on, leaving tariffs in place even after some were ruled unlawful. The US was juggling trade fights worldwide, making Canada's dispute just one of many. Businesses and workers waited in limbo, hoping for relief that never seemed to come. The legal and diplomatic deadlock left everyone frustrated. The longer the standoff lasted, the more damage piled up. Hopes for a quick fix faded, replaced by uncertainty and fatigue. The talks continued, but the breakthrough remained out of reach. As of September 2025, the Canada-US trade relationship is at a crossroads. Negotiations inch forward, but trust is badly shaken. A likely compromise, a tariff rate quota, letting some Canadian metals in duty-free, but slapping tariffs on anything above the limit. The bigger worry, the looming 2026 review of the CUSMA trade deal, which could reopen old wounds or even threaten the entire North American trade framework. Both countries have learned hard lessons. Canada about its vulnerability, the US about the cost of protectionism. Rebuilding trust will take more than deals. It'll take real effort to mend the partnership. The world's friendliest neighbors need to start talking again before the wall between them becomes permanent. The future of North American trade hangs in the balance.